So good morning, everybody. Thank you so incredibly, very much for joining. Really do appreciate your time. I am Angie Wallace, the interior trainer for the PYA, head the welfare group. That's the sort of sideline for my main job. I'm training for the purser course, along with Sandra Jordan, who is the yacht purser as well. So the aim of the welfare group, we were brought together as a group of volunteers. So we do volunteer our time. We're not lawyers, apart from Corinne, really, we're not professional counsellors. So what our aim is to empower crew, let them know their rights, help them with welfare issues such as bullying, harassment, abuse, being stranded, and a multitude of other things that come our way. We have a designated email address now with the PYA. It is welfare@pya.org. And I monitor that, and it's starting to pick up a little bit of traction. And we are starting to make our voices known as well through the PYA, hoping to do more webinars. We did one at the end of January, focusing on bullying and harassment. And today we wanted to get you guys together, all the flag states, to sort of introduce ourselves to you, to create communication, to create a connection with each other so that we can support one another and kind of almost like lean on you if we've got issues that we just don't quite know where to go, and to get your professional guidance as well. So that's pretty much the preface for today. Sent you out the sort of like the little questions that we'll want to go through with you guys, but yeah, hope that that's okay. And again, thank you so much for your time. So for no further ado, let's kind of introduce ourselves. Obviously a lot about me, but Martin Oates from the Isle of Man, if you'd like to sort of say hi to everybody and kind of give us a little bit of a rundown of yourself.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Nice to be here. So I'm in the policy department at the Isle of Man Ship Registry. So we do a lot of the MLC work for our ships, approving SCAs, approving DMLCs, unfortunately also crew complaints. So I'm one of 3 people who deal with those here in the Isle of Man. I've been doing it for about 5 years, so hopefully can provide some insight on the process.
Fantastic, thank you. And Sophie Piercy from the MCA.
Morning, thank you for inviting me to be here today. It's lovely to meet everyone, and hopefully we can get some good connections from this. So I'm the policy specialist for living and working conditions for the UK. So I cover the MLC and ILO 188, covering all of the crew complaints, and wages and everything. So a lot of all of that comes to me.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Eva Lian Veldkamp, you are from Northeast Marine, aren't you? I'm not actually that familiar with you. I think you've been introduced via Corinne, haven't you?
Yes, that's right. Yes, and I work for Northeast Maritime Institute, but also I'm an IMO policy coordinator for Dominica Maritime Administration, which is also an open international flag state. And I would love to tell you something about what we do in this regard on psychological safety, bullying, and SASH in the maritime sector, because we did some amazing things together with other people as well. So looking forward to tell you about that as well. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. And James Hatcher from the Cayman Islands. Lovely to actually see and meet you finally.
Hi, Angela. Hi, everyone. Yep, I'm James Hatcher. I'm the shipping master for the Cayman Islands. well, it's part of my job. The other much of my job is dealing with policy and legislation, but probably about half of it is on the shipping master, which is dealing with all aspects of crew welfare, crew complaints and the like. And I've been doing this for quite a while now, so I've had a lot of involvement with the PYA more on the member side, and Nautilus and the like, and obviously Sophie through the MCA on the ILO report. So yep, I produce an annual report which has just gone out, which will hopefully be of interest to people on the sort of complaints we get and the sort of welfare issues we get as a flag, and look forward to collaborating more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so onto the actual welfare group itself. Corinne Rayson, hello.
Hi everyone. So I've been the crew coach, and as Ange mentioned, I am a counsellor, and I've seen well over 1,000 yacht crew so far. And I also offer a guest leadership course, which is 3 months long. So we tackle issues like harassment and bullying and just better prepare them to manage it.
Fantastic, thank you. And Sandra, my co-conspirator.
Yes, hi everyone. Like Angie, I also teach a PYA course, and yeah, sometimes bother James Hutcher for crew welfare issues when crew need a little bit of extra assistance. Yeah, I also come from a background of sort of legal and finance, so I try and provide a little bit more help and assistance to crew when they're feeling like they don't understand like what their contracts say or the steps that they need to take, because often they're in a fight or flight response, and it can be quite difficult to gather your thoughts and figure out the next steps. It can be quite scary, especially when you are away from home. So one of the things I do try and do is facilitate the communication as well between the vessel and the crew member if there are issues in a non-confrontational way, so that we get better results.
Fantastic, thank you. Dominique Schmidt.
I am one of the founders of Virtual Purses, which provide purse services to boats of all sizes, especially if they don't necessarily have a space on board. So kind of alleviating that stress and pressure from captains and other senior members on board. And together with Sandra and my other business partner, we also started Siren Club, which is a bit more of a support network for purses in particular and senior yacht crew. And just people wanting to, elevate their skills and continue training, but not necessarily doing a course. So we do that on the side, offering support to girls like us who are on board and may just need a bit of a wider network. And yeah, looking forward to forming relationships with you all.
Thank you. And then we've got 2 members that are actually on the ground working as pursers. So we have Helen Oakley and Samantha. So Helen, would you like to quickly say hi? Can't hear you. I think you're mute.
Sorry, mute button was on. I'm Helen Oakley. I'm currently purser on an 85 metre on rotation, so I've just come off on leave, so I'm able to join this meeting. I've been purser on board yachts, various sizes, for 20 years, so lots of experience, and I've seen lots of different scenarios related to crew, both good things and also not so good things as well, that kind of thing. So nice to meet you all. Thank you.
And Samantha.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm also a purser currently at the moment on 85 metre. I've been on various yachts of various different sizes, from 140 metre down to now 85. And like Helen said, I've seen various different things on board about crew welfare, including situations that regard myself and previous vessels. So I'm really glad to form connections with you so that I can make sure in future, if I come across anything like that, I know the correct steps to take for myself and my crew.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Samantha. And I think that's one very important thing that we need to establish is that we need to make sure that we are doing the correct steps. So thank you, everybody. So really kind of jumping onto the questions. So we're looking at assisting the crew, you know, from our side, and then rather than going to them jumping straight into flag, if we can get some background of the steps that need to be taken. So the procedure, that if somebody does come to you, flag, with a complaint, what actually is your procedure? Maybe if we sort of go in round robin, Martin, Sophie, James, Eva, would that be all right?
Yeah, shall I go first? So in our case, the first thing we have is we have a form on our website, which we ask seafarers to complete. The reason for that is twofold. Firstly, that's the point that the complaints procedure actually kicks in, and we'll treat it formally as a complaint then, as opposed to like a request for some advice or a request for guidance. And secondly, it makes sure that we have all the information that we need to resolve it as quickly as we can. So what we're looking for really is the documentation, which will be an SEA and any supporting documentation. And also crucially, we need the consent of the seafarer to approach the ship owner. So often the seafarer is quite worried about blacklisting and things like that. So we won't ever kind of contact the ship owner without the consent of the seafarer. And then the procedure really depends on the nature of the complaint. It's just a case of gathering evidence, going to the ship owner, getting their response. And then once we've got all the evidence, we'll sit down sort of as a management team and we'll resolve it one way or the other. We'll write to all the parties and let them know our findings, and hopefully then it will be resolved. If it's not, we can look to move towards enforcement action, which can take many forms. It can be an extra MLC inspection. We can withdraw the MLC certificate, or in an extreme case, it can be a prosecution, but fortunately it's never come to that yet.
That's good to know, thank you. Sophie.
Thank you. So we don't have a specific form. It is something that we are hoping to get at some point. I'm arguing for it. So all of our complaints, or most of the complaints, tend to come in through email. And so we've got a dedicated MLC inbox, which they come through to. I tend to sort of screen them, make sure that they are a UK flagged vessel or they are operating in UK waters. Otherwise, we're quite limited to what we can do if we're not the flag or port state. I'll ask for any relevant information. So if they are talking about wages, I'll ask for their contract, which should state their wages. If it's to do with crew accommodation, I'll ask if they've got any pictures. If it's bullying, harassment, if they've got any sort of evidence on WhatsApp messages or anything like that, we'll ask for those as well. And then depending what kind of sector it's in, if it's yachts, we tend to pass them to our large yacht services team. If it's MLC, we'll pass it to the MLC policy lead, who then normally goes out to the customer service manager for the vessel. If they're not operating in the UK, we can flag a note on the Paris MOU to raise the priority of the vessel for an inspection, and we'll just pop a few details in there of what the nature of the complaint is, so that whoever does pick up the inspection, they can sort of hone in on that area. I think that's pretty much it, to be honest. In terms of the yacht ones, as I say, they go to the large yacht services and then they will reach out to the owners. But I tend to have less oversight of those ones, just because they don't normally come under sort of full MLC complaints if they're a privately operated yacht or anything like that. So they do tend to sort of fully take those ones on but we don't get too many. I spoke to the guy in large yacht services yesterday. He said normally about 10 a year,
Okay.
and most of those tend to relate to wages. And when it comes to wages, it's not normally sort of the basic pay, it's normally the bonuses and the tips.
Oh,
So
really?
that was quite interesting. Yeah, so I think that's it on that one from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a really interesting. James, what about you?
Yeah, hi. Our system is pretty similar as you'd probably expect to that in the UK and Isle of Man. We do have an online form on the website, but we certainly don't insist it be used. And most people probably, I would say, don't. And like with what Sophie said, most are by email or phone call followed up by email, because I do try and keep everything. Whilst I'm happy to speak on the phone, I would prefer as much as possible be written down. But basically, process is obviously all complaints are treated in strict confidence. However, if the seafarer wants this to be raised with the owner, like Martin said, we do need their express permission for the complaint to be acted on. Only be they've got to give express permission before you can take it further. We won't take anonymous complaints, but obviously if there's some but we won't pass on the name, but we can probably take action, or certainly on the enforcement side, which I don't have involvement in as the shipping master. We purposely keep it separate, the shipping master role and enforcement. But if seafarers give me permission, I can pass on information to the enforcement side. I actually anonymize that as well, so we keep that completely separate. Even internally, the names are not passed on. I try and gather as much information as possible to advise further, to try and resolve as much as possible informally, and most of the time that can be the case, especially if the seafarer then informs the captain or the management or sometimes the owner's team that they've been in touch with flag. That often makes a big difference. If informal resolution is not successful, I try and gather as much information as possible. Sometimes it's difficult, especially on our yachts, perhaps less so on the other ones, other flags, but certainly Sophie alluded to it, is on pleasure vessels that not in voluntary compliance with MLC, it can be a little bit more difficult, especially if there's no contract in place, which currently isn't a legal requirement, but that is changing for Cayman very, very soon. But we do try and get as much information as possible. WhatsApp's written information. It's more difficult when it's only verbal, which in some cases, especially in some parts of the world, is the case. If mediation is not successful, and it usually is, I do have the option under the law of a formal decision, which is binding on both parties. That doesn't happen very often. I'd say once every couple of years. I think I've probably done about 3 in the sort of 7 years I've been doing this, but it is there as an option, and obviously a formal decision would obviously be very a court would take that very, very seriously if it was presented. So so that's the process for us, broadly similar.
Great.
Thank you.
It's interesting as well, picking up on that you are actually still quite active with the private vessels, because I think, a lot of people will just naturally assume, well, we're private, therefore flag isn't going to help us. So that's quite interesting. And Eva, what do you do?
Well, of course, our flag administration has the similar policies as we just heard. And my technical colleague, who is more involved with the daily business of registration, is more, knowledgeable about how exactly it works. But I noted down some differences. Differences, something which may be valuable to add on this. And then next to that, I would just like to tell you also about our work within IMO and the difference of the things I just thought about when I heard the other people speak. So first of all, what I wanted to point out is that we have a form also, like the Isle of Man also has, and the whole policy. And we also have some description some descriptions about the onboard complaint procedure. So there should be contact information about the DPA and our office, so the Office of the Flag also, so that people can contact the flag directly. And of course, if the problem is if it's a minor complaint or something that can be solved pretty easily, we just encourage people to do that. But if it's more serious, we also describe how to how to contact the DPA directly, or that it's going to be possible, and also maybe an external authority. And then when we are noticing a complaint of a serious business, so you have, like mentioned before, you have the MLC, like the labor related complaints about wages and everything, but sometimes also, you know, about something else of more serious matter, like bullying or sexual assault or harassment. And maybe, you know, the captain or the master also is involved, so that makes it like pretty unsafe for people. And I think that that might be a good thing to talk about, because I think what we notice right now is that these complaints or these issues mostly are seen from the labor perspective, but I think that's two different things, right? You have safety and you have labor issues or rights. So I think regarding, you know, complaints or labor issues, that's that requires another perspective, you know, from every other side. So maybe I'm going too far. I don't want to take away your structure. Yeah, but yeah, it's pretty much the same as was talked before. And I there was one other thing, but I forgot that, but it doesn't matter.
Oh, it will come back to you, I'm sure. Yeah. But thank you. I mean, it's all really interesting. So, and what overall, what is the theme that you're getting in your complaints? I mean, I know that wages have always been kind of up there, but I'm not quite sure whether that is relevant or prevalent now. So Martin, what is the sort of the genre of the complaints that you're getting?
Well, I should say, first of all, in our commercial fleet, we've got about 280 ships and we've got about 40 commercial yachts. But those 40 commercial yachts make up the majority of the complaints. I used to work in yachting before here, so I have a fair idea why that is. So they mostly relate to, I would say, the end of employment. So October is usually the busy time for our complaints, and it's usually when employment's been terminated, and it's things like repatriation, notice periods, taking of leave during notice periods, and things like that usually. So that they're usually quite easy to resolve. We have in the last year, there's been a bit of an uptick in payment of wages complaints where you know, the owners having cash flow problems or liquidity problems or whatever it might be. And sometimes we've had to move down the route of claiming on insurance and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Okay. And Sophie?
Yeah, so during COVID, we saw a sort of increase in repatriation complaints. That was sort of across everywhere, just because obviously trying to fly anywhere and land anywhere was quite difficult. And in the last year, we've had an uptick in non-payment of wages, which comes from the Russian sanctions. So we had a few of those come through because obviously the banks all got sort of put on hold and things like that. But in terms of more general, when there isn't something kicking off in the world, we do tend to have dispute of wages with the bonuses and the tips, and repatriation generally is quite a difficult one.
What do you do? What I'm quite shocked hearing more about the bonuses and tips. We think, okay, how does that get resolved? just being very interested in about that now.
As I said, I don't tend to have oversight in sort of in the complaint dealing, but I would assume if there's, you know, if their contract says they get X amount percentage of tips or anything, it's easier to have a paper trail, but obviously you can't prove how many how much tips were given. So I'm not entirely sure on that one, but I can definitely ask one of our guys from Large Yachts on sort of how they tackle those ones.
That'd be interesting to know. Thank you. Yeah. James, same
Yep, hi.
thing, wages?
Yeah, broadly, but I'll take the tips one first, actually, because obviously we get quite a few of them being the main yacht flag. If it's not in the contract, and I would say that was virtually never, maybe very, very rarely, there might be a contractual bonus. Certainly in terms of gratuities, yeah, I tell them I can't get involved in that, and they'll need to seek legal action on that if they want to. But again, caution them that that's probably, again, it is by nature it's a gratuity, so it won't necessarily be easy. So yeah, on that one, yeah, put my hands up. We don't get involved in tips unless they are contractual, which is obviously, as Sophie alluded to, she thought would be the case for the UK too. But generally, yeah. Obviously, we've got quite good data now, having done this annual report for a while. But yeah, wage disputes every year has been the main one. There was quite a massive increase actually in 2020 on wage disputes. I suspect that was probably due to COVID affecting cash flows, and obviously there was no chartering and stuff in 2020 in particular. Other than that, yeah, as Martin said, repatriation, termination, they obviously often run hand in hand, and using leave during notice is one of the main issues we get asked about. As Martin said, they're generally fairly straightforward. In terms of now, again, wage disputes are still quite high, and I think they've probably, as Sophie said, a little bit of Russian sanctions. Issues getting money out of the banks there. So whilst they have dropped since COVID, and complaints generally have dropped since COVID, wage disputes, and as a percentage, wage disputes have actually dropped, which surprised me last year. But
yeah, I saw on your report.
it is still the highest, but termination was increased a lot, and I'm thinking that might be as a result of the economy bouncing back after the COVID, where people perhaps have been changing jobs more, and therefore when jobs change, obviously there's sometimes issues with termination on either side. So yeah. In terms of other complaints, bullying and harassment, touch wood, very, very low. I don't know if that's just because of people not wanting to report formally. Hopefully not. Hopefully it is the case that people feel they can report formally. But yes, they hover around 2% of the total complaints. So yeah, I think there was 3 last year. Other than that, yeah, most things. Things like medical treatment, pretty low complaints. There was a bit more during last year when we had COVID. There was a few issues with that linked to COVID and medical treatment. But yeah, generally wage disputes, termination, repatriation are the main concerns. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Eva, is that the same thing for you?
Well, we are only a very small flag registry, so we don't have a general theme, I think, because we only register a very few vessels. We mostly focus on policy, and also we focus on making the world a better place for people who are working at sea. And in that respect, I would love to ask also my other colleagues about their reporting mechanisms for bullying and SESH, because I think, like I said before, I think it is in general, it's now quite normal to see the labor issues as the same as the safety issues. And I think when you're bullied or when you're harassed, that's not a labor issue, that's a safety issue. And that's why we also raised this last year within the IMO subcommittee on human element training and watchkeeping, because we proposed to start improving education on this part, on all all sides. So for seafarers, for leadership, for companies, for flag states, for organizations, for everybody, because I think it's what we see right now is that it's, and there's not so much data, but that maybe has to do something with the unsafe situation. Because if you are bullied or if you don't feel safe, you also don't feel safe to speak up. So that might have something to do with the lack of data and the lack of reports. And then also, if you would like to report something, there must be some kind of information before you start it or when you come on board, like for example during the familiarization round. Well, if something happens or if something, you know, feels not right, then you can do this and this and this. So there's a big, you know, gap, so to say, in that way. We think, and we raised the issue last year. We started a working group on it because the IMO was, or member states of the IMO were in general in favor and supporting this initiative. But also, you know, it always takes a lot of time, and also, you know, you have so many different perspectives, and also I always forget the word, but everybody wears a different hat with different, you know, interests. That was it. So what we did is we raised a group from the Center for Ocean Policy and Economics. That's kind of like a think tank, which is meant to solve the wicked problems in the maritime sector. And we worked on the IMO model course on personal safety and social responsibility. That's part of the basic safety course for every seafarer to take inside of the SCCW. This is described. So, and it was decided last month in February, this model course was taken to a separate working group within IMO with member states. It was worked on, and it's now going to be, is going forward to the Maritime Safety Committee, and then it's adopted, hopefully in the beginning of next year. And then, you know, everybody has this mandatory training requirements that, you know, training institutes can then use to update education. And also it raised awareness of it. So obviously there's something needed also in other IMO conventions, like there's already work to be is going to be done in the ISM code, for example, to see how responsibility is taken right now and what updates could be made or should be made. And I think that's just really good because, yeah, like I said before, when you don't hear these complaints or don't hear these voices, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, right?
Exactly.
And I think that when you are aware of these things, then you can do something about it. So I'm very, you know, excited about that. You know, this is surfaced a little bit more, and yeah. So,
I think as well that that's what the theme that we're kind of seeing more is that crew aren't necessarily going through the correct channels for the complaints for that sort of issue. And from us, from the welfare group, we do see this as a safety issue. So that's kind of where we are starting to come from. Corinne, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, before I have to pick up my son from daycare, just a couple of questions and reflection. Firstly, I'm so surprised to hear it's mostly contractual issues or termination. I work as we all do, closely with crew, and I'd say I'm more on the ground, and I hear otherwise a lot around bullying, assault, and harassment. James, I do have a question for you because your particular flag state has come up with a recent incident on board, and I'm not too sure if you can do some work behind the scenes to find out if this vessel is under your flag, but there was a suicide. Clive Barker was his name. And we're just trying to understand where crew are falling through the gaps, and we want to provide that continuum of care. Are there multi-layers and they're not getting the support that they need? Like, the large yacht services haven't heard of that organization. And Sophie, it seems like it's quite separate to what you do. So how do we keep tabs on everything if we're hearing that there's a lot of issues around assault, bullying, harassment, and you're hearing completely different complaints? So there's a disconnect somehow, and I'm trying to understand where that's happening, but we want to identify where the problems are. And I think this is a real good case study. If, James, you are aware of the vessel Sea Lion and this particular crew member, like, how is this information not being received and communicated back?
That's directly to you, James.
I must say I'm not aware of that. Obviously, if that is a Cayman Island ship, then that would be a breach of the law to not report a death on, assuming the death took place on board. So no, I'm not aware of that, and I would strongly push anyone who has the ability, and I will look into that. I don't know even know if that is a Cayman Island ship off the top of my head, but if it is, then yes, it does need to report it to us. Another part of my job is I am the superintendent for births and deaths on Cayman Island ships, so I do have to, under the law, undertake a death inquiry into any deaths on board, and have in the past done inquiries on both through online on channels, but also in person for deaths, including suicides. But yes, that one does. If that is on a Cayman Island ship, it does need to be reported to us.
Okay, so is there a way I can contact you just to follow through on that? Because I think it's really important. I'm in touch with his mother, and no one from the industry contacted her, and she had to wait for the body for a very, very long time to return to the UK.
Well, you have emailed me before, so I think you must have my contact details, but if not, it's shipping.master@cishipping.com.
Okay, thank you.
What's the name of the boat? I'll look up if it is on our flag.
Sea Lion. It would have, it might have changed names though. So I'll put everything.
I mean, is this a long time ago? Is it?
No, the death happened a few months ago.
Okay. Well,
And
be very
I've got a client. Pardon?
Be very surprising if it's not been reported, but
okay. Yeah, I've got a client who recently left. It was he previously worked on that vessel, but he got another position and ended his life on a different vessel, which may not be Cayman related. Okay. However, there's a bully. One of the reasons why he ended his life is due to bullying on board, and there's been a recent high turnover crew because the bully is still there.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, the only vessel I can see called Sea Lion, it says not proceeded with, so I'm guessing it's either changed its name or it never flagged with us. So,
okay,
yeah.
well, I'll email you with further information
okay.
anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So I think this is exactly where we are trying to bring us all together, because from our side, I know when I contacted the MEBA, that they were having their association, I actually contacted them and said, I know that the discussions is going to be around, you know, captains and management companies, and how about bringing forward the issue of how to bring complaints and the harassment on board and so forth. And I was basically shot down because mental health is not seen as a safety issue. And I think this for us is predominantly where we are seeing it is a safety issue, because if people are being bullied, harassed, abused and so forth, it is directly affecting their work, their ability to work, and naturally will have a fallout. So now, as we can see, your theme of the complaints coming through are more about that contractual. What sort of documentation, apart from the SCA and that's sort of, you know, side of it, if it is more about someone being abused or anything, that's a little bit more difficult to document. What would you accept, or what would you try to gather for documentation, Martin?
So talking about bullying and harassment, we have to bear in mind, as the flag state, everything we do has to be backed up by the regulations. In this case, it's MLC. And the way MLC works for bullying and harassment is it generally places the onus on the ship owner to have policies and procedures for it. So if we got a complaint of that nature, we'd probably be looking at what the ship owner is doing to prevent it. Are they having policies and procedures? Is there awareness of those on board? What are they doing to enforce them if they are aware of a complaint? But to answer your question on documentation, it really depends. Probably witness statements would be something that's appropriate. Emails, WhatsApp, just whatever the seafarer is able to provide, really, to corroborate what they're saying.
Okay, yeah. And Sophie?
Similar. If it's sort of in the UK, we'll probably try and get someone out there who can speak to each member of crew, sort of take them away from anyone else, and either potentially say, we've heard of allegations of this, and see if they'll sort of share any information, find out if it's kind of a boat-wide problem, or sort of a more individual sort of issue. Obviously, if it does go wider and you get more reports, it helps build that evidence case. But the difficulty for us in the UK is sort of courts picking up anything that's sort of on the kind of lower scale. You have to have a lot of evidence, and there's just not much kind of take up unless it's a sort of ship safety issue rather than a people safety issue. So that's one of the difficulties we have, but that isn't just specific to maritime. Sort of sexual harassment and things in general are just very, very hard to get through sort of the justice system here in the UK.
And the problem as well is that we are crossing jurisdictions quite a lot. Sandra, you got your hand up just before I get to James. Do you want to ask a question?
Yes, I just, while we're on that, just on the, is there, like, I live in South Africa, so when we have a complaint to the police, we've got a specific affidavit form which we go and fill out that has, you know, I am a female residing at large. Do you have like a template for that so that crew can just record the details, you know, what, so it's just basically going back down to evidence that you would accept that they can write it down in a legal way for it to be investigated. That was just my question for, yeah.
Okay. Over to you now, James.
Well, on that previous question from Sandra, obviously that would be something for the police. So we wouldn't be able, whilst we can pass on information of alleged offences to the police, only they can get involved in that. So yeah, but other than that, I'd concur with everything that Martin said and Sophie. It's yeah, we just need as much information as possible to look into these. Obviously, ideally, yeah, written preferably, but obviously, I would always advise for the sort of assault, anything that might be an offence in the place where the yacht is, because obviously very, very rarely, if ever, do we have yachts in the actual exclusive jurisdiction of the Cayman Islands. But they're mostly obviously in other parts of the Caribbean, or more often in the Mediterranean, and obviously there's mixed jurisdictions there. The amount of time they spend alongside it, it could almost be argued they're they're borderline in the exclusive jurisdiction of the country where the boat is located. So it would always be best to report any alleged offence in the place where you are. The police are there on the ground. They have experience in this. So I would strongly advise that be the case. Obviously, if someone wants us, the Cayman Islands police, to take up any complaint, we're more than welcome, happy to pass that on, that information, but it's for them to determine, the police to determine what to take. And as Sophie said, in many countries, it is the bar for prosecution can be quite high.
Naturally, though, obviously, if it's more of a contractual stuff, the terminations and the wages and repatriation, then obviously you guys would step in rather than the local state. Yeah. And Eva, have you got anything to add there? I know that time's ticking on, so we've still got quite a bit to get through, but I might probably just merge a few things together.
Yes, thank you. I try to be as short as possible. First of all, I think that it's very, very important to realize that the consequences of reporting of people should be safe. So if somebody reports something and you're sure that you will lose your job, for example, whatever the complaint or the report will be, then you think twice, or maybe you don't even report. So that's, I think, a good thing to realize. Also, it's, I think, good to realize that this is not only a labor or MLC issue, it's a safety issue. And when you are raped or harassed or bullied, you are not feeling okay, obviously. So if you link that to operational safety, that's also a safety issue on the operational side, apart from it being like inhumane also, you know, to feel that unsafe or be that unsafe in your workplace. And I think that what we need right now, or what we really need to raise awareness for, is that these things are not like specifically only a labor thing, it's a safety issue. And I think when you look at it from that side, it would be normal to see it also as non-compliancy, because when you are severely, you know, harassed or raped, it should be normal that an investigation should take place immediately on board. So we heard some voices in our working group from the Center for Ocean Policy and Economics. We heard some voices that, for example, on cruise ships, there is big demand for like medical kits to investigate these things. So you can, so you can have data on that side as well. And then you can also take responsibility, certainly from a flag state, and also from a port authority or from any other authority who may be, you know, involved in this. Because I think what we also see is that people are just, or authorities or organizations are always pointing towards each other, like, no, this should be done this should be done that. And, you know, the people who are a victim tend to just, okay, you have to wait, or things are taking a very long time, or, you know, it's shoved under the carpet somewhere. And I think that's not, from a humanitarian point of view, that's not how things should be. And also, you know, on the policy and compliance side, I think it would be really interesting to see if we can look at it from, you know, from a safety side instead of only from a labor side. And it's, so the last thing I wanted to say is that these changes which are now happening within IMO, there's also a joint IMO-ILO working group who is looking at this as well, just exactly for this reason. So thanks.
Oh, that's heartening to know, because I know that a lot of things that we hear about is, and definitely on a lot of the, you know, yachty Facebook groups, is that this captain, that chief officer, whoever it is, they've got they're known in the industry for being bullies. They're known for sexually abusing people, etc., etc. And all they're doing is they're jumping from one yacht to the next, from one jurisdiction to the next. And so it's known in the industry, but nobody can pin this person down for a formal criminal procedure. So, you know, what we would like to see is that, you know, if somebody has been reported for abuse and being a bully or something like that, that goes against their code of conduct for their COC, how can we make sure that that COC is revoked? How can flag states communicate between one another to see if somebody is applying for a CEC, whether there has been any complaints about that person on their COC for these sort of reasons, and how can we actually stop the COCs and the CECs from being issued? And I know that's a very, very weighty question. It's got a lot behind it. And I think that this is something that we will now probably finish off with, because it's going to take probably a few minutes. So Martin, what's your take on this?
It's a difficult question to answer. First of all, I should say we don't issue COCs in the Isle of Man. So Manx person wanting a COC would get one from the UK. So we don't issue them, so we don't have the authority to withdraw them or cancel them. We do obviously issue flag state endorsements for COCs. And we do have the option that there is a process to cancel those, to withdraw those, if somebody commits an offence or an incompetence under Isle of Man regulations. I have to be honest, that process is mainly used in a casualty investigation where something's gone wrong. I don't think there's any reason why it couldn't be used for sexual harassment, something of that nature. If it was found, we could use that as well. Regarding checks before we issue them, there's no international list at the moment. I think that would be something would have to be done internationally at IMO. Quite a lot of things to consider. What sort of threshold would you want before someone's recorded in that list? That sort of thing that would make it very difficult. Obviously, there's the possibility that someone could make a malicious complaint, or you have situations that happen on board where two people are each accusing the other of bullying. Situations like that would make it quite difficult to implement, I think.
Yeah, I know it is a toughie, and there's a lot behind it. But Sophie, as like the voice for the MCA, which is the COC issuer, what can you tell us?
So our regulations, so it's actually the Merchant Shipping Act. We can cancel a certificate or suspend it where the holder is convicted of an offence under Section 47, Paragraph 5 of the Merchant Shipping Act, which is if a person makes a statement for which he knows to be false, or recklessly makes a statement which is false in a material particular for the purpose of obtaining for himself or another person a certificate or other document which may be issued, or if a certificate is issued or endorsed and the conditions for its issue or endorsement have not been complied with. So it is specific to sort of maritime, and actually the sort of the certificate itself, the process of going through that. So unfortunately, we don't have a sort of mechanism for revoking for other concerns or kind of other reasons. Investigations from the sort of maritime side of it, you would probably be able to put under the conditions for the certificate, in that if they've acted negligently or have been drink driving, and they've sort of had an incident because they've been over the influence, that could be revoked under the conditions of the COC. And in terms of when we issue CECs or flag state endorsements, we verify all foreign certificates, but that's only to check that the certificate itself is legitimate. And any there is no mechanism to check for any reports of bullying or harassment against that person. And unfortunately, it would kind of have to be a global mandated thing in order for that to work effectively, because if we issued a flag state endorsement from Canada, for example, if they don't record who has allegations against them, we would never be able to find that out anyway. So I think it would need to be sort of a global mandated IMO probably thing to record, because otherwise we don't know whether them saying no, he hasn't had allegations is because they don't record it, or because he hasn't had any or she hasn't had any. And so it's a difficult one there. It would have to be kind of a global mechanism implemented for us to be able to do that.
If they're naturally with allegations, it's very difficult for sure. If somebody has been arrested for assault, something of that nature, would that be grounds for a revocation?
No, not in the UK at least. We wouldn't even be told. If they were arrested by the police, we wouldn't even be informed.
We've got some serious work to do, then, we stop these people coming through, getting through the cracks. James, anything to add on that one? I know that you don't actually.
Not really, yeah, we don't issue COCs. I fully agree with everything Martin and Sophie said. We do have the same system the Isle of Man has for inquiries, and I don't see that it wouldn't necessarily be impossible to use that for the same thing. Obviously that would only revoke the endorsement, it wouldn't revoke the underlying COC, though of course if I think such letters would, if there is a revocation, I think it would be required, it would probably be passed on to the COC issuing country. But as Sophie said, in the UK that might not lead to them being able to revoke the COC. Agree that it would need to be international, anything like that. Yeah, I'm not sure what's to add, other than to say I think this is much more the point you're making about whether these people are employed. It's a much more industry HR issue than a flag issue, and it's much more likely that could be resolved, because getting 180 countries to agree on this and agree standards is much more going to take much longer and possibly be impossible, whereas the industry is quite, particularly in yachting, is quite small, and I think they perhaps need to step up here. If these people have got a reputation, then why are they employing them?
Well, absolutely. And the thing is, yes, obviously yachting is still in relative terms very small, but these issues aren't just in yachting, they are in the commercial shipping, maritime arena. So, and it has been going on for a long time, and it just I think, and especially nowadays with the ability to travel as much as we do, to cross jurisdictions, to the internet has opened up so much. So I think, now is the time that maybe this can go to, the think tank. Maybe Eva, you can be the voice for the think tank on that one. So Dominic, you've just raised your hand, so let's grab your question before we finish off.
I think I was going to say, even though the yachting industry is quite small, I mean, that should be a bit of a bonus on our side, because you kind of have more control, whereas if it's really big, then it comes into other issues. But the fact that it's small doesn't mean that people inside the industry shouldn't be looked after, and things we should have protocols for things like this. So I think we should actually use that to our advantage, rather than using it as a kind of an excuse to not be following through and pinpointing these members that are making it an unpleasant industry to work in. So I think that's my point.
Eva, I didn't quite get to you beforehand, so can you add anything to that general theme?
Yes, first of all, we are also, Dominica is also issuing COCs and endorsements, and we are, so we have a whole list when we are suspending or revoking licenses or certificates, and one of them is criminal conducts, also drunkenness or incompetency. And I think it's that's also very important, because you have to draw a line somewhere, right? You have to draw a boundary of what is unacceptable behavior. And I think it would be quite normal if the whole world agrees that some things are just not acceptable, like murder, rape, criminal acts. And I think we can also, so we are raising this issue within IMO already for quite a while now. And what we notice is that nobody disagrees about this. So I think I'm actually quite confident that once, this is acknowledged, that there will be action also. And I think, or maybe I'm naive, I don't know, but
I don't know, because right now I'm just pushing everything over to you, because you just like you being the voice at that level for us, and I think it's great, and it needs to be raised.
Yes, and
absolutely.
I think the willingness is definitely there, and it might be have something to do with seeing the risk, because if you see, like if a ship is having some kind of damage, or there's an accident, you see the risk, you will treat it differently than if you don't see the risk. Like if you see the risk of people that way, if you see people, or if you don't see people as human, you can just easily exchange them for somebody else, or you don't feel or see the risk so much. So that might be something that might be helpful looking to the future. And yes, we are very happy to continue with, we will continue our work in this regard, and also we hope that we can connect with other member states and administrations as well. So yeah, just also an invitation to the people who are looking at it right now. If you have an idea, or if you like to help, then please let us know, because we notice that the more perspectives and the more people who are joining it with the same reason to just solve these wicked issues, then you can do something about it, and then change is also happening. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eva. If you would be so kind to pop into the chat for everybody the details, so people can contact you and offer assistance or anything, that would be amazing. Thank you. Sandra, raise hand, and then we'll have to.
I've got a short question. So I just wanted to see if we have spoken about it with the DPAs before, but if somebody had a mental health breakdown, like they had to be hospitalized, or to go, to be removed from the vessel because of a mental health issue, right, because of bullying and harassment on board, how would the flag states treat that in terms of being them able to have their 16-week medical leave? Would it be treated as such, or would it just be like, okay, most of the time the yachts are like, cheers, goodbye, you're gone? Is it something that could be treated as like a physical injury? I'm just curious, yes or no?
Who wants to answer that one?
I think the answer is yes. We're obviously not medical experts, so as long as you were signed off by someone who was a medical expert for however long it takes, then yeah, it's valid under the 16 weeks and so on.
Yep, agree completely.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I think from my side, I think this has been an amazing call and connection with everybody, and it's lovely to see faces as well. So, putting the face to the name is very, very helpful, and I hope that it's been helpful for you guys, the flag states, as well as for us, the welfare group. Has anyone got anything to sort of input and to say before we close out?
Can I just give a quick plug to we have a Seafarer Welfare app which we've developed. it's got a few features that might be useful. One of them is an SOS feature. So if someone's having a crisis or something, you can just press this button and you'll get through to a trained counsellor 24/7. It's open to all seafarers. So if you go onto our website, there's a big banner at the top of our website. Just click on there for some information.
Fantastic, thank you. Sophie?
I was just going to ask if there was kind of a plan for this group to sort of meet again. As I said, I spoke to my large yacht guys yesterday evening, and they sounded quite keen to attend. So if we do sort of take this forwards, it would be great if we could have one of those guys here. They're the ones that actually deal with the complaints and will probably be able to be more helpful than I've been. So yeah, I was just curious if I could, if we do go forwards with another meeting, if you're happy for me to forward the invite on to them.
Well, I think it would be a fantastic idea is to actually maybe open this up to a webinar so that crew could actually join in, see you guys, make that connection as well. I think we'd probably have to think about the structure of it rather than just sort of rehashing what we've kind of said, if we're making a bit more of a structure. And I'd be really open and willing to take lead from you as to how that would be, if that is something that Martin, James, Sophie, Eva, you would all be willing to do, is to come on an actual webinar. That I'd be really happy.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think when crew can put a face to a name, and it's a bit more friendly and open, then they're more likely to report things, and we can get to the bottom of issues quicker.
That's fantastic. So we'll get our think tank on and create a bit of a structure for a webinar, and maybe where are we, March? Let's think about probably in a good couple of months, so it kind of gives us time to establish the criteria for it and see what your availability is. That would be incredible. Thank you. So I think, yeah, that has been a great morning. Again, thank you so much, Martin, James, Eva, Sophie, for joining the rest of the welfare team. Thank you so much as well for all of your help and input, and wish you all a fantastic day. I have recorded this, so I will send the recording out to everybody just as a reminder. And then we'll definitely be in touch regarding a webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.